Hey everybody, welcome to week 5. So looking at the syllabus, looking at the agenda, I saw that project 3 is due today and the cones are also due today, which probably explains why there aren't that many of you here today. Lots of good questions that came in. I think what we want to do today is first, if there are any questions about project 3 or project 4, let's get those out of the way. Then we'll talk about project 5, which is your last project, and it's all about Google Web Toolkit, GWT. And then we've got a kata to do, we'll get to that at the end, and then that'll be it. So, how'd Project 3 go? How'd the cones go? Everybody, I think, got it in, so lots of submissions and stuff, some good questions on the community. Any lingering issues, any surprises that you found that you'd like to tell me about or talk about more? Yes?
I was quick with 3 trying to deal with exceptions. I'm still not sure the best place where those exceptions should go for our application.
Okay, exception. So when to throw an exception or when to catch an exception? Okay.
Where to catch more specifically.
Cool. That's a very good question. So I think where I've sort of gotten to is that you want to catch the exceptions at the edge of your program. I mean, like your main method. So an exception is part of the contract, part of the API. Right, a method, takes some inputs as its parameters, it returns some result. Returns some result, and oh yeah, by the way, if something goes wrong, it throws an exception. And so that's part of its contract to say here's what happens when something goes wrong. But as far as handling that exception, that's something that is left to the client of that method, the code that calls that method. And most likely, that kind of error handling usually exceptions are exceptional. Something has gone wrong, something unexpected has occurred. And so some of the time, it might be appropriate when the exception is, how to say it, it's like not surprising that you got this, maybe the file isn't found or whatever. Okay, then, catch that. So let's say a method called readFile that might throw a file not found exception. Maybe it's not too surprising the file can't be found. Great, and you know how to handle it because maybe there's like a default file name to look for or something like that. But most of the time, I think you'll want to catch exceptions at sort of the periphery of your application because that's where error handling should happen. Because different kinds of applications handle errors differently. In your command line application, you're probably going to catch the exception, write out an error message, and exit the program. We started to talk about rich internet applications, web applications. Tonight, you want to pop up a dialog box. There are different ways of handling it. So I think most of the time you want to handle it at the edges of your program. Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
I know there are different circumstances where you would handle it in different situations, but I was told that the generic way is whatever method actually brought in those arguments or the faulty data is the method that should handle it if something went wrong while trying to process it.
So like the caller of it?
So main is the one that's getting it from the command line.
Mm-hmm.
So in this instance, it would be main. But if I had another function that was prompting the user for data and then I wanted to process it somewhere else, that method would throw it back to me where, since I'm the one who got the data, I would then retry and get some metadata or something.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good guideline. So let's say, you've got a method that, I like your example. Prompts, prompts the user, hey, enter your. So imagine instead of just reading everything from the command line, you write it from the console from standard in. I think it's completely reasonable to say, enter your phone number. You put in a phone number. It does the validation. Probably the method that does the validation would throw some sort of invalid phone number exception, and then because there again, your business logic, your interaction logic would probably be, print out an error message that says, hey, invalid phone number, and prompt them again.
Yeah.
So that's a good example. I like that.
You wouldn't want to then deal with the client because you probably don't know the client exists sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just some processing method.
Yeah. No, that's good. So it depends, but I think towards the periphery or maybe towards the user interaction. Yeah, I don't know. That's good. Well, anything else? The cones. There were a lot of them, weren't there? Yeah, but I think so they've expanded a bit. So they added the Java 7 stuff and Java 8 in the last year. I think it gives you a really nice, broad introduction to the language. And so I hope that you guys get to see things like working with streams and like someone's question about MapReduce. And it's like, okay, yay, getting your money's worth, even though it's a lot of stuff to do. Any questions on that? Have you guys encountered things like MapReduce before? And yeah, a little bit maybe heard of it. And let's see here, the lambda syntax. Did you get to play with that much? I can't remember if the cone actually. Yeah, a little bit. Okay. Well, cool. Good deal. Yeah.
The mock cone was a little weird. Just told me to do something, and
a lot of the koans were they kind of gave you something to start out with, but they didn't give you any context or go here to read up on this kind of thing. So it was just like, do this, and sure, you can Google it and figure it out.
Right.
The mock objects and whatnot. Okay, it's used in kind of testing and whatnot. But
Oh yeah, like what's a mock object or what's a lambda? That's a good point. Let's see here. I do talk about mocking in terms of testing in the dependency lecture, where we do talk about dependency injection pattern, and then how you can, if you follow the dependency injection pattern, you can test with mocks. But that's of course later in the syllabus than that particular code. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that feedback. Any questions on Project 4? People had a chance to dig into it yet? Let's see here. Is that due next week? Yeah, it is. Okay. Okay. Well, we talked about it last week, and yeah, like I said, it kind of comes fast and furious. Was last week also midterms?
yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Well, you survived. Congratulations. Yay. Thanks for coming tonight. Here's a pat on the back. You're all good people. Okay. Yeah. So right. So Project 4 was all about starting to work with the web, and you've now got a client and a server. They're both Java programs. They talk over HTTP and they talk REST. This week's project, Project 5, is all about using Google Web Toolkit. Is all about using Google Web Toolkit to build what's called a rich internet application. So much like last week, what I want to do now is go through, not only go through the assignment, but also create the archetype for you so you can see sort of what all the pieces parts are, and I'll walk you through what the archetype gives you. I hope you had a chance to review at least the beginning of the Google Web Toolkit. Screencast, yes? Question.
Sorry, does this build off of the Project 4? The Project 4 needs to be implemented completely.
Does Project 4 need to be implemented completely? I think it's got the search functionality, so you'll need that. But unlike the previous projects, it doesn't. It's not like you take your Project 4 code base and take all of it and apply it to this. Really, what you'll be doing here is, I think you'll be using your phone bill, your phone call class. There won't be any command line anymore. Yay! We're now in the 1990s. And you won't be using your servlet. Instead, you'll see a different way of doing client-server communication. So yes, there'll be some of it, but not all of Project 4 has to be done. I think that search functionality is probably, which actually may inform then how you implement the search functionality. If it's perhaps a little too close to your servlet or something, move it in closer to your domain classes towards your phone call or your phone bill, because you'll be reusing that here. Good question. So let's walk through the Google Web Toolkit, the GWT Rich Internet Application assignment, and this is your opportunity to ask questions about it. It's different. So we've been working with Java, and Java's great, and Java really excels at work at the at the back end of applications. So the things that implement all your business logic, interact with your database, which have lots of threads going out at the same time. Java's great for that. But then there's the web. And the web is implemented in a different set of technologies, right? You've got HTML, you've got HTTP, you've got JavaScript, DOM, all of that stuff that maybe some of you have heard of, maybe some of you haven't. While Java does have APIs and libraries for writing thick clients, for writing, you run a Java program and it runs there locally on your machine and everything like that, those are kind of going the way of the dodo. Everything's on the web now. But one of the problems with the web, especially the web circa 10 years ago, well, closer to 15 years ago now, is that while there were things like JavaScript, different browsers implemented it differently, had different language features. And certainly when we start talking about CSS and DOM, there was a lot of diversity back then. Even though there were standards, not all the standards were implemented correctly. Plus, and because of that, and because of a number of other things I outlined in the screencasts, Google, when they were looking to start to develop what are called rich internet applications, think about Google Maps, or even some of the fancy stuff in Gmail and everything. We have a very responsive web application where it doesn't feel like using Amazon in 1997, where it's like fill out form, click submit, wait for page to load, look entire page, right? That user experience went away, right? That looks really, really old now because now because we have technologies that allow us to provide that same sort of interactivity that you get with a native desktop application now on the web. But Google, when they were looking to sort of standardize a tool set, they said, well, we've got all of these web technologies that are still pretty diverse. And when you develop a web application, especially one for mass consumption, you have to consider all the different browsers out there. And this was a while ago now, where there was still where browsers were evolving very rapidly. You think about sort of the Internet Explorer 6, 7, 8, 9. There were just big changes in terms of how they worked, and it was getting better, but it was still big changes. And so, in order to write an application, you had to have all of this arcane knowledge of how exactly tables were rendered in this browser on this day with this CSS. It was really ugly. So there's all that knowledge there, and Google, the company, didn't want to have to train all their web developers in that. As a matter of fact, they already had a bunch of Java developers, and so they're like, okay, here's what we want. We want to be able to write Java, and we want to write in Java, but then deploy it onto the web, and not like in an applet, which is insecure. You have to download a plugin, and it's slow, and it sucks. We want to write Java, and then what we want is to be able to compile that Java, not to Java bytecode, not to JVM bytecode, but to web stuff. So JavaScript and DOM and all that stuff. And what came out of that desire is something called Google Web Toolkit, which allows you to build rich internet applications almost exclusively in Java. And so for this course, I think that's a good fit. It gives you guys experience writing web applications, but you don't need to learn a bunch of JavaScript, or you need to learn a bunch of HTML or a bunch of DOM manipulation. It gives you the program language that you're used to, so you can use the tools that you're used to, like IntelliJ. You can write unit tests in it using JUnit, all of that good stuff. But what you get out of it isn't a command line application, isn't even a client-server application. It is a web application. Okay, and you can watch the screencast for more details there. So for this fifth project, you're going to build a rich internet application for your phone bill using GWT. And so it should have all the functionality of the previous assignment. So create a phone bill, add phone calls, pretty print it, search, all of that good stuff. And the user experience is up to you. Here, I'm not going to say make it look like this. This is an opportunity for you to apply some creativity to make something that you think is usable. Don't go too crazy, and don't don't use this as an opportunity to invent your own new user interface paradigm where everything is like in emoji or something. That would be kind of weird. Because remember, Sean and I have to grade it. Actually, I'd probably be grading this one because I like interacting with your UIs. But there are a couple of constraints on the UI. I want you to have a help menu with a README. So you still have a README, but instead of printing to the command line, you have a menu and it prints a dialogue or something like that. And note that when it comes to the communication with the backend with the server, you don't need to use your REST-based client that you developed in the previous project. Instead, we'll see GWT has really nice mechanisms for abstracting the client-server communication, so that you don't need to do the work of converting your phone bill into or converting your phone call into a bunch of strings that are sent to some URL. You can just use the objects and pass them back and forth. Let's see here. Error handling. Hey, no more writing out to the command line, pop up a dialog when something goes wrong, or you do something visually. So if you've got, I don't know, a text field for inputting a date, turn the box red or something to indicate an error, stuff like that. So to get started, I have an archetype that will create a new project for to get you started here. Okay, so we'll do this. It's called phone bill GWT. I'll complain about some stuff. We gotta be used to fixing the tilde by now, and then putting in your login ID. Oops. Okay. So this archetype gives you all sorts of, it really takes care of configuring all of the GWT stuff for you. There is a Maven plugin for, cool, that's all good. Sorry, added files from GWT project Maven archetype. Let's open it up and take a tour of, actually, no, let's just run it first. So you create this. Now, GWT, as you'll see in the screencast, there are a couple of ways to run your GWT application. One is to build the whole thing and deploy it to a container like Jetty, and you can do that just by saying Maven Jetty run. But you can also run in something called developer mode that allows you to change your Java code and just reload your browser to see those changes. So if you've ever done any JavaScript programming, that's a very common way to develop JavaScript, right? You make a little change over here, reload, and you can see it. Well, you get that same kind of stuff, you get the same kind of rapid changes in GWT by using developer mode. So let's see it running first in just regular old web mode, in deployment mode. So we can build a package, and here this will build a WAR file with all your stuff. So it takes Java source code, uses a special Java compiler to compile that source code, and instead of generating bytecode, it generates a JavaScript file, a nice and compact, optimized JavaScript file. And it generates a little bit of HTML and stuff like that, and it puts it all in a WAR file. Let's take a look at it. Target phonebillgwt.war. So it's got the regular stuff that we'd expect in a WAR file, like all the classes, and then it's got a bunch of JavaScript files, and it's got a GIF, it's got some other stuff. And then it's got some class files down there. The class files are all on the server side, and then when you hit certain URLs, what's served up is what's served up is an HTML page that references JavaScript and stuff. Well, we'll take a look at it in a moment here. Anything else there? Oh, it's also got some jar files in there. Here again, it's an entire web application all bundled together. So now when you say Maven Jetty run, this will start up Jetty, which is a web container, and deploy that web application to it. Same with Jetty. Jetty doesn't care that it's a GWT application or if it's your Project 4 servlet. It just runs that web application. And now when you go to a URL like localhost 8080, it takes a moment to load. Fingers crossed. Oh, what doesn't it like? Oh, weird. What doesn't it like? What doesn't it like? Yeah. Couldn't load the... It didn't have the phone bill correct. I tested this, I swear. Like this weekend, I was like, oh, everything works. Great. Let's run a developer mode instead with GWT run. I think that's what it's called. Oops. Oh, I know why, because I think I went, no, that's development mode. Oh, that's really weird. I will fix that and get back to you guys.
Is the second link just where you're running with the Jetty?
Oh, Jetty Run War. I think that's why I said. Okay, I was not running with that totally explains it, right? It's Jetty Run War. So this is important because the way the build works is that you need to run it from the exploded war to get all the JavaScript files and stuff. Thank you. Good call there. Okay. I'll edit that all out of the screencast so my YouTube fans don't go all up in arms. I don't know. Yeah, I know. Okay, so now let's go localhost 8080. There it is. Okay, cool. So it displays a page. This is the beginning of your GWT user interface, and we'll see sort of how the source code for all this works. It's got a button on it called ping server. When you click that button, it sends a request to the server, and then pops up in this alert dialog what it gets back from the server, which is a string, which is actually the toString of an object that's returned from the server. It's basically a little skeleton phone bill that I put in. Hey, Lisa. Midterm survey. Although of all the email alerts, I suppose that's probably yes. Okay. So let's take a so let's so this is like your GWT application running. There's another way to run it, which is to use Gwt Dev Mode. And so you do that by saying Gwt run, because I don't have an example of it here. Gwt, so the Gwt Maven plugin, the run goal of that. What this does is it doesn't start up, well, it uses something called Gwt Development Mode, which uses its own Jetty to run the back end of your web application, and then has some fancy stuff for your front end. So it brings up this this desktop program, this thick client, and you click the launch default server. And so then it sends you up to this URL. It says compiling phone bill. So this is where it is compiling the Java code into JavaScript. And it also uses a special browser plugin. So the first time you hit this URL, it'll ask you to install a browser plugin. What that browser plugin does is it will take all the mouse clicks and stuff, and instead of sending it, how does that work? It sends it to a different place in the server. I can't remember exactly how that works. It's all magic. You can read about it. But what it allows you to do then is set. Oh, that's right. Right. So instead of executing the JavaScript in the browser, what it does is it sends all requests to the backend, and this allows you to attach a Java debugger to it, and so you can debug your client code not in the browser but in Java. And we should see some examples of that. Anyway, so you ping it again, and you get this. So let's take a look at the code, and then let's debug it. So I'm going to run in development mode. I think it's Gwt debug. We'll run the application in a yep, there it is in the debugger on port 8000. So now I will open up my my project that I created, which is in sorry, it's on the X directory. Yes, thank you. Get summer phone bill GWT POM choose. Let's just use that window. Okay, so taking a quick tour. You've got a POM XML, lots of Maven configuration. Sweet. Okay. What do you have for source code? So you've got some Java code, you've got some resources, and then you've got your web app. This is the web app stuff just like we saw in Project 4. There's a web.xml. It defines a servlet, and we'll talk about that servlet. And it also tells you, hey, the default page is called phonebill.gwt. Let's look at this HTML file. So this is this is the HTML file that is served up by the application. And actually, as we saw here in the browser, which actually, sorry, I need to attach to the debugger first. Add remote, localhost 8000. Oops, unnamed. Let's edit configurations. Localhost 8000. Let's attach this guy. Great, it connected. Poof, now it comes up. So I'm debugging it. Everything's loading. I will go and refresh here. It's recompiling it. Sorry, what? Oh yeah, well, but 127.0.0.1 is localhost, so it was redirected or something for some reason. Okay, so let's make sure everything works. Yay, it does. Okay, cool. Sorry, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so here's the source code, and sure enough, if I go and view the page source, exactly the same thing. It's all being served up. And basically what it's doing is it got, well, some static content here, but then it says, hey, go include this JavaScript. Well, let's take a quick look at that. This is all the generated JavaScript that, actually it's the beginning of the JavaScript, that is your application. Let's see here. I don't know. Can I see anything that sort of points to how it works? Nope. But that's okay. Everything, unless hopefully you don't have to go debug this stuff. Hopefully I don't have to go debug that stuff. That's crazy hard to read. Okay, so it all works. So it loads some JavaScript, and one of the things that JavaScript does is it creates the button, the ping server button. Great, HTML file. Okay, so what happens there? So phonebill.gwt. There's also a configuration file called phonebillgwt.gwt.xml. This defines what's in a module in GWT. It's basically information. It's like your application, and it configures certain things. It inherits or imports other modules. Which it's much like a package import in your source code. So hey, there's a whole bunch of classes that are part of this com Google GWT user module that I want to import. Similarly, there's a standard theme that I want to import. I have a GWT module that called projects, which allows you to use my superclasses on the client side. So pop off the stack, push that on the stack. Little diversion into how GWT works. So you write. Nope, sorry, one more thing. It also defines a servlet here. If I go to my POM, in the GWT plugin, what is that thing called? Let me make it big here. No, here we go. GWT Maven plugin. I define my module, and oh wait, where do I put the entry point? That must have been here. Oh yeah, here's our entry point. Okay, so you say, hey, GWT, I want to use a bunch of other modules that give me classes that I can call. And then I'm also going to define an entry point. Now, an entry point is like a main method. This is where your program on the client side starts. So let's just go to it. So my entry point implements a class interface called entry point, and it has one method that actually should have an overrides on it, called onModuleLoad. Okay, so this is where your client side application starts doing its work. So when you compile the GWT application, what the magical GWT compiler does is it starts at the entry point, as specified in your that XML configuration file, and says, okay, great, I'm going to start analyzing that code, and I'm going to convert it all into JavaScript. So seriously, what it does is it parses the code, and instead of generating bytecode, it generates JavaScript. Now, this is Java code. you can do a lot of things in Java code, right? You create objects, you look at other classes, and you call methods and stuff. The GWT compiler, right, and so you can do all sorts of things. However, there are some things that you can't do. So for instance, because all this is running in the browser, you're limited by what the browser can do. So you can't do things like create files, right? You can't have a browser access the file system. You can't do things like, regular expressions work a little bit differently. You can't create a socket, right? All sorts of things like that. You can't use, a database API. But there are a lot of APIs, a lot of Java APIs that you can use. And so what GWT has provided is something called JRE emulations of really all the classes that you probably want to use. And these are your friends like the Java util classes, like ArrayList and TreeSet and List and all those guys. Those are available to your GWT client-side applications. This is nice, because you know these APIs, right? You're familiar with these APIs. And so you don't have to use like GWT special ArrayList. Nope, you just use the same old ArrayList, and they provide what really is, like a compiled JavaScript version of that, at least conceptually, to you. And that's really what you get. Okay, so you get that from these modules that you inherit. You also get a bunch of APIs for interacting with the browser. So for instance, let's look at the first thing that we do right here. What's the first thing we do? We create something called a button, and we add a click handler. So a button is a GWT object that represents, a button on the page. So we create a button up here, and then we go get something called the root panel, and we add it to it. So you have Java objects that represent these UI widgets in your application. And if you watch the screencast, I go into gory detail. I basically read you the Sears catalog of here's like all the stuff that you can do, and you can fast forward through that. No, actually, in many respects, the reason I do that is because your application will be built out of all these things. You'll see how to not only like what all the widgets are, but how to lay them out, and how to arrange them, and how to interact with them. So, for instance, here, what we say is that this button, you add a click handler, and a click handler is an interface that has one method. So IntelliJ is nice enough to shrink all that stuff for me. I don't think you can use lambdas yet in GWT, so you still have to do this the old-fashioned way with anonymous inner classes. We say, hey, click handler whose onClick method will be invoked when that button is clicked. It's sent a click event, and here's how we handle that click event. So what you're doing here is you're using Java APIs to specify the behavior and contents of your web user interface. That's a lot. Any questions on that? Have you seen this kind of program before, where you're creating like UI widgets and you're registering event handlers on them and stuff?
It's a lot like Swing.
It is a lot like Swing, yes. So if you've ever done any Swing programming or AWT programming, it's a lot of the same concepts. Slightly different APIs, but the same concepts. So what you're doing here is you are building your user interface, both in terms of its contents, its layout, and then how you interact with it, or rather what happens when the user interacts with it, all in Java. And this is good, right? Because you've been programming in Java, all term, and it's Advanced Java class, so good. Okay. It's not like Advanced Java and a whole bunch of JavaScript and HTML. Nope, it's Java. So this is what happens when you click. So I'm going to set a debug breakpoint right here, and I am going to click on ping server. Oh, interesting. Why didn't that? I was expecting that to stop there. Oh, because I've added lines. Stupid Dave. Actually, no. I'm going to recompile. So the reason that, or at least I think the reason that didn't stop there, was because I hadn't compiled it correctly, or the line numbers got out of sync.
Since it's supposed to perform the same functionalities with previous assignments, how does the print and save work? Still to external data file?
Yes, but just like Project 4, you don't need to write it out. That's a very good point. So it's not every function of the previous one. There's not a requirement to be able to save the contents of. Yeah, you don't have to save the contents of a phone built to its file. Yeah. Okay, let's try this again. I hope that the oh, because I haven't attached yet. Come on, there we go. Attach again. It's attached. There's this thing. Yay, everybody's running there. Now I want to reload. Oh, drat. Huh, so it's not... So the debugger isn't picking that up. I'm really surprised. Pardon me here. Let's just see what threads are running. Huh. Okay then, so what I would have expected, kind of surprised why I'm not seeing it. Maybe I just need to, it's on the wrong line or something. Oops. What I was expecting to happen, oh, there it is. Nope. Oh, because all the threads are paused. Huh. Well, that's really weird. I am not, it's not hitting my debugger breakpoints like I would expect. Well, drat, I wonder what's, okay, so one more thing I want to try. Welcome to developing in GWT, where nothing works the first time because you haven't done it in a year. Okay. So I clean everything out. Huh. So attach on 8080. It's waiting for it to load. Cool. I reloaded in the browser. It's doing its thing. Click ping server. Nope, it is not hitting that breakpoint. So I must be confused. Yeah. It is, but I'm running in developer mode, so it should be running. So like when I click the button, what it should really be doing is calling back to this development mode stuff, which is running on port 8080. Which is looking for the debugger to attach on port 8000, and it should be stopping. So that's really weird. I don't know why I am not catching the debug breakpoint.
Is it because it's at 888?
No, this is where the HTML is being served up from, right? Lots of ports involved, here, right? Because there's lots of Java programs, right? There's one which is the Jetty, and that's listening on port 8088, 88. And then there's also the debugger, or so then my understanding is that then development mode would start up, and actually it didn't start up until I attached on port 8000. And so since I did that, I thought what would happen is when I clicked this ping server.
I thought there was a message in
There's this.
Go to the debug tab.
Says, yeah.
Last time it said something about.
Interesting. Pump events. Okay. Nah. Huh. Damn it. I feel unprepared. Unsafe.class. Okay. Sorry about that. So that's where it's hitting it. It's asking, it's pinging the servlet. Okay, so we'll talk through some more code. I was hoping I could walk through it with you in the debugger because I think that'd be a more effective way of learning about it. But I guess I can't, which, I need to investigate that. Anyway, so what happens here? So this is all because this is code that is called from your entry point. All this code is for the client side and will get compiled into JavaScript. So when you click the button, what it does is going to make a call from the client to the server. So this code is running in the browser, And so now it's going to call it's going to call the back end, well, to do something. And in what this case it does is it calls this ping method. Well, it calls this ping method, but not directly. So there's something called, well, when the browser talks to the server, there's two ways that it communicates with the server. The first one is just, you enter in a URL, you hit return, and that does get, right? We learned about that, right? You get a URL. And so then when you get the URL, if the URL returns HTML, great. Now you're in HTML land, and you've got your HTML page, you've got your JavaScript engine, and et cetera, et cetera. One of the things the JavaScript engine provides is something called the XML Httprequest Object. This is an object inside JavaScript that your JavaScript has access to. And what this object does is it makes calls back to the server. This allows you to call to the server without reloading the entire page. Explained better it's explained more in the screencast. Now, when you call the server, it is not a synchronous call, meaning that when you call the server, you don't wait for it to be processed and returned. What you do is you sort of say, hey, you set it and forget it. You call the server, and then you continue on your merry way. If you don't do that, your UI locks up. Right, because every time you try to do something else, well, those requests, those events get queued up, waiting for it to return. So that's bad, right? So instead, what it does is it makes an asynchronous call. It says, "Hey, go fetch some URL." But when you make that call, you say, "Okay, here's the URL I want you to get, and when it returns, execute this code." Well, in GWT land, the way that works is the following: you have this ping method, and it takes an argument which says, hey, here's what you do when the call returns. So after you make the ping call, and when ping returns, do one of two things. If it was not successful, if you get like a 404 or a 500 or something like that back from the server, this is represented in GWT as an exception, as a throwable, and the on-failure method is called. The on-failure method of this async callable is invoked with a throwable, and what we do is we just get the toString of the exception, and we send it to window.alert. That'll pop up the little dialog box. On success, what ping returns is an abstract phone bill. So it's a phone bill that's returned, and when we get that phone bill, we create a string builder, and we go through all of the phone calls in a phone bill, and we append each one of those phone calls to that string builder. And then we get a toString to that string builder and put it on window alert. Remember, this is all happening in JavaScript land on the client side, but you can still use these APIs that you're familiar with, like string builder and collection and everything like that, because of that JRE emulation. You can use my classes like abstract phone call because I've created a GWT module with my code in it also. And so now you're using APIs that you're familiar with, even though it's all happening in JavaScript. So that's what happens when you click the button. You click the button, it makes an asynchronous call to the server. Now it's very fast, you don't notice that it's asynchronous. It makes an asynchronous call to the server to get you that phone call, that phone bill, and then prints it out.
Does that pop up the print out?
It's the alert, the window.alert. So calling window.alert will pop up the alert window. And this is like a JavaScripty thingy, right? There is a function called alert that displays that. Okay. Kind of wacky? Yeah, it takes some getting used to. It's anonymous interclasses. It's kind of hard to read at times. But wait, there's more. Okay, so let's take a look at what this ping thing is. So this ping is called on this async method. And what's this async? It's a thing called ping service async that you get by calling this gwt.create. Now, with this ping service. So ping service is what's called a remote service. This is the client server, the communication between something in the browser and something on the server. And what the thing on the server is actually a servlet. So the cool thing about GWT on the server side is just a web app. And so it's a servlet, just like you're used to, just the same thing you wrote in Project 4. It's kind of a little special servlet that handles this. It has a servlet called, well, the ping servlet. This at remote service relative path is an annotation that tells GWT, hey, the URL for the implementation of the service is going to be /ping. As a matter of fact, if you go and look in dev mode here, if you look at what Jetty's doing, it is getting requests for getting post requests to /phonebill/ping. And so that's going to be a servlet called ping. But all of this is abstracted for you, and you're given a nice type-safe Java interface by using these services. So you have something called a ping service, which extends remote service. Remote service is a GWT interface, and it's got one method called ping, which returns a phone bill. So this is what you have on the right, and this is I guess one more thing. This is in all this code that we've been looking at so far. Things like phone bill, GWT, and ping service, and the ping service async are all in a package called client. So there's this package naming convention in GWT for all code that it goes on the client side, which is compiled into JavaScript or otherwise accessed by your entry point somehow, goes in this client package. So this is a convention which tells GWT, the GWT compiler, hey, what's on the client, what's on the server. Because there's a lot of server-side code that does things like, works with files and input streams and stuff that you can't deal with in on the client, puts all that in this server package. So you've got the ping service, and ping service is implemented by this ping service impl class, which is over here in the server package. This is the only thing on the server side right now. Ping service ping service impl, I'll make it big, implements ping service, and it extends something called remote service servlet. So this is a GWT servlet for the back end, which handles a whole bunch of magic for you so that instead of having to implement methods like doGet and doPost, what you do is provide methods, the implementation of the methods from your service interface. So your ping service interface had one method called ping, which returns a phone bill. And this is the implementation of that. So you have a ping method, and all we do is create a new phone bill, add a new phone call to it, and return it. Oh, and by the way, it's important to override this do unaccepted failure method to log the log uncaught exceptions on the server side. So this is what happens on the server side. You've got this servlet here. Now, actually, can I go to the source code? Yeah, this is like way too confusing. Okay, never mind. But I will say this. This is a servlet, just like the service that you've written. And but remote service servlet implements the doGet and the doPost methods to basically take a special wire protocol that GWT uses to represent this remote method invocation. So what you're really doing in your, let's see here, go back to our entry point here. You call this ping method, you give it this async callback. All of that is specified here in this async. So async is a client-side class that represents the client making this asynchronous call. And here again, we have a method called ping. I think it has to be called, it has to have the same name here as your ping service. It has to be called ping. And instead of, ping takes 0 arguments, so instead of taking, ping takes 0 arguments and returns an abstract phone bill. So it's got no input and returns you an abstract phone call. The asynchronous version has 1 argument, which is an async callback of that thing that's returned by the server-side method. Right? So here again, what you get is this kind of magic that lets you say in the client side, call that ping method, and call that ping method asynchronously, and when on the server side, when the ping method returns, deliver the result of calling that method to this async callback. So this is sort of the magic of GWT RPC, remote procedure calls. Goes into more detail in the screencast. So you've got this on the server side. Sorry, this is on the client side. The implementation's on the server side. Going a little deeper. So you've got this servlet. Is a servlet? You've got to tell your web container about that. You do that in a couple of ways. First, well, you need to tell the container about it. You need to tell GWT about it. The way you tell the container about it is here in your web XML. And so you need to define a servlet and a servlet mapping for the guide, just like you do in your project 4 for your phone bill servlet. And so this tells Jetty about it. This tells the web container about it. And here in your GWT XML, you also need to tell GWT about it, saying that, hey, when you get something with /ping, that redirects to this service impl. I don't think you'll need to change any of this for your project. You might want to rename the ping, but there's a lot of places that you have to rename, and so unless you do a really good global search and replace, don't worry about it being called ping. Okay, so that's all the stuff that happens on the back end. Hopefully a lot of it's already configured for you. One more thing to note here on the front end. The way I create this async is an interface, right? It's an interface. The way I get an instance of that interface is by calling the magical GWT create method. So GWT create, in this case, what it'll do is it'll take an interface. So it takes a class, right? So from reflection, it's a Java line class. This is the class for ping service. And it does the following. It interrogates and says, oh, hey, do you extend remote service? Oh, great. What I'm going to return, what GWT create is going to return, is an object. This is all in JavaScript. We're going to return an object that is capable of calling the ping servlet on the back end. And it wires all of that together by using information such as such as this remote service relative path. So it knows to then call, /phone bill. Phone bill is the name of the web application. /ping. And so that's how it wires everything together. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite understanding what it is that we're creating.
Okay, good question. So what do you guys need to do? This is an example of how to use GWT RPC, which is probably one of the more complex things that you need to do. What you need to do is take this very simple application which contains one button and add stuff to it. So you will see in the screencast there are a whole bunch of other widgets that you can use. Things like text fields and text areas and just places where you can display text and pop up things and have use the widgets that make sense to you. So here in your entry point, you need to create all of these widgets, and then you'll do things like register listeners on some of them. So like when you click this button, read information from this text field that describes my phone call, and then call using the asynchronous service, send that information to the server, and then you'll have to implement stuff on the back end here to handle that information. So you'll take this ping and probably rename it to something like add phone call, and it'll take arguments in a phone call, and then it'll then you do stuff with your phone bill application. One other thing to point out, you've probably noticed that on that the information is passed back and forth. Well, in Project 4, when you pass information back and forth between the client and the server, what was that? What kind of data was it? It was string data. It was text, right? So so if you dig down, well, actually, you didn't have to dig that far. It's like what you do is you put together these URLs, and it's like post this data, and it creates this URL and puts it there, or go query it with this get, and so you form this URL, and what it returns to you is a bunch of strings. And then on the client side, you probably take that string, maybe you parsed it, or maybe you did something with it. Well, strings, you've got to manipulate them all yourself. Is kind of a pain. This is Java. You want to use Java objects. And so I guess the final piece of GWT RPC is that it handles all this object serialization of taking something like your phone bill. And by the way, this is but phone bill is another class in the client package. So phone bill gets so what happens is on the server side, the phone bill is created. So here in the servlet, you create the phone bill, you add a phone call to it, and you return it from ping. What this does, when you return it, the GWT framework will take that phone bill, serialize it, turn it into a string, which is sent to the client. Sorry, sent back to the client. Is received by this magical object created by GWT get. That magical object knows how to take that string, turn it into a JavaScript object that represents your phone bill, and deliver to the onSuccess method. So if any of you did something like in your project 4, when you go and do a search, if what you returned is perhaps your text format for your phone bill, and then on the client maybe you converted that into use your text parser to convert it into a phone bill and then printed it out or something like that. It's kind of the same thing here, except that you don't need to do the object serialization. GWT takes care of it for you. Watch the screencast and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. If it doesn't, ask a question about it. So, I hope that answers your question. So what you need to do is take the skeleton of a project and make it more interesting than this, right? Add stuff to it, put in some more text, make it so there's, data entry fields and data validation and a menu with a README and good stuff like that. Yeah.
So as for the functionality, are we responding to one bills with one call each time? That we did with this? Or?
No, multiple. Definitely multiple phone calls. So then, while the ping service simple, the servlet right now, it does this. This is just to show that, look, I can create a phone bill and have it returned as an abstract phone bill to the client, all that good stuff. Yes, yours, you'll probably have multiple remote methods, I can imagine. Things like, add a phone call, search for phone call between these dates and stuff like that. And so then you'll have to, store your phone bill, as state there on your on the back end. My experience in the past with the GWT project is that, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but once people get into it, they kind of dig it. It's I don't know if you've had much of a chance to do like GUI programming and stuff, but it gives you a lot more freedom to exercise your creativity than just writing stuff in the command line. Any other questions? Yes.
So instead of using like a get and a put, is that all handled underneath the hood by the GWT?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So all of the interaction with the server. Now, it's still HTTP under the covers, right? It's still using the HTTP protocol because that's all the server knows, right? That's all Jetty knows how to do because it's a web server, right? So it speaks HTTP. And so then all of the encoding of data and putting together the URL and choosing get and post, I think it's always post, is handled for you by GWT. And so you get to write Java, even though it's a web application that you're writing. Yeah.
So when we're actually calling something, like let's say we hit a button and it's supposed to, put in a new phone record.
Mm-hmm.
Is that being done in the more traditional Java sense, like a dot, add a new phone record, or is that being done through some kind of like a ping service here?
I think for that particular operation, that'll be a remote operation because your phone bill will live on the server side, and you should use the same phone bill class that you've always used. There on the server side, and so it lives over there. And then you probably, in order to tell the server, in order to tell the server that, you'd probably have add phone call. Although I suppose you could have something like just save phone bill, and you could send the whole phone bill down if you wanted. Yeah, it's up to you. Use your creativity. Just as long as it's put the appropriate amount of investment into making it look nice and readable. And if you want to use things like images, you can't submit images, but you can if they're like hosted on a publicly available URL or something. You can include that. Neat. Scary. Yeah.
Have like, you loaded it up, and maybe you want to already populate it with a few phone bills.
Mm-hmm.
What's the appropriate way?
Pre-populate with a few phone bills.
Rather than so every time we start up, it's typing like 20 phone bills.
Yeah, good call on that one. A couple of ways. So one thing that you could do is you could hard code that into your servlet. Although that probably works well during development, it's not something you'd want to submit. So either remember to comment it out, or you could do something like when your phone when your server starts up, have it look for one of your text files. For instance, maybe in a well-known location. Want to make sure though that your code is robust enough so that when I run it in like my magical environment with all the security turned on and stuff like that, your application doesn't crash. But it just means like, hey, if it doesn't exist, it's cool. Oh, hey, there was I tried to access it and there was some exception. Oh, that's cool. Maybe write log exception or something, but don't blow up. So that I think that'd be another way of allowing you to have persistent data between runs while you're developing it. Yeah.
So would GWT allow you to like import a text file, like you said, load up the data from a text file in a location?
It's not so much GWT as it is on the back end of the server. So it'd be like your servlet. So like your remote service. So I mean, take ping service simple and turn it into phone bill service simple or something like that. And then on the it's a servlet. So I think what you'd want to do is override the init method. And then like on that you could load load phone bill file if it exists, right? And then implement that to do
I
your.
was saying just is a functionality of it to have a button that says import.
Oh, you could, but you're thinking like upload from the client. You could definitely do that. And let's see here. Do I have an example of uploading a file from GWT? I do. It's a little wonky. So I'm pretty sure somewhere out there I have that.
Take a little bit of work.
But yeah, it might take right. And so then there's a lot to GWT, and then boy, I encourage you to explore. But like so many things like this, you need to balance like getting the project done with like exploring all the really neat things it can do. Temper yourself accordingly. Yep.
So what does testing look like? Trying to
What does testing look like? So everything on your server side, it's just Java code. You can use JUnit. For your, and I think I have a to-do to actually add some tests to this. You've got a couple of options. I do talk about them. I talk about them at the very end of the screencast. There is a way that you can, you've got JUnit and you can do things like interact with your UI. It doesn't actually bring up a browser, so it's not like a browser test, but it will fake out the environment enough so you can interact with it. You can write it that way. If you've got logic in your client-side code, I recommend you can test that logic as long as there are no calls to GWT create. So GWT create is really the piece of magic. So if there's a way that you can structure your code such that all the logic is sort of away from GWT create, then you can just write that. You can write JUnit tests for that. And actually, if something you guys really want to do, maybe I can spend a little bit of time and augment the archetype to do that for you. Although you can just like add source test Java, and I think that'll probably work okay. So that's how you would do that. In the very last lecture, the Advanced GWT, which unfortunately I do not have a screencast for, between the dependency injection stuff and the Advanced GWT, there are ways to structure your GWT client code to make it very testable, where basically you abstract out all the stuff that requires GWT create, that uses any of the widget classes, because those are the things that you can't just run in a plain old Java VM because it's JavaScript code, right? You can't run it in there easily. But that is definitely advanced and something that I encourage you to maybe think about a little bit. But here again, in terms of getting your project done versus learning everything that you can, and make that trade-off. Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Time for a break. Let's take 10, and then we'll come back and do the kata.